Hi everybody, welcome to part 2 of our watercolor technique practice paintings. So we have a setup from our last video of 21 boxes. We're going to practice each of these techniques, but we will not get through all 21 in this video. Some of these are going to require a first pass with paint, and we're going to add to it or subtract from it later on. So we're going to set up a few of these boxes for later on. And then a few of these boxes are our basics, and we will be also getting to those as well. I have some different materials with me today. Some of them more than what you would anticipate for a watercolor painting. So I'll run through quickly what I have with me in front of me. I have a basic set of watercolor paints. This is just the Prang brand, and there are 8 different colors. I have a cup of water. I have 2 different watercolor paintbrushes. You can tell that it is a watercolor brush because of the bristles. These are really soft bristled brushes. I have a roll of tape, some paper towels, a pencil, and then either, if you have available to you, an X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors would work as well. So all of those materials we're going to use for this video today. The first step is going to be preparing our paint and our brushes for use. If you're familiar with watercolor painting at all, you know that this paint is not going to do anything until I activate it with water. I can press on this with my finger, nothing's happening, it's not rubbing off onto anything. It is dry. I need to activate it with water. So I'm going to dip my brush into my container of water, and then whatever color I'm choosing to work with first, I'm going to apply some of that water into the little paint well. So my first one here that I'm going to work through is the solid wash. So for this one, this is the most basic thing we can do. We're just passing over and making one solid color with our watercolor paint. And you'll notice that I'm getting some pooling over here with my green. In order to make this kind of a solid color, I'm just going to go over this again. The more water that you use with watercolor paint, the lighter your paint is going to be. So a lot of the times we require, some back and forth with the painting to get it even. You can also take some of these pooling marks up with paper towels, very lightly on your paper. That will pull up some of the water that's collecting there. Or you can always try to pull that up with your brush. If I take all the paint out of my brush and I wipe some of my excess water on my paper towel, I can always touch my brush to my painting, and that will pull up some of that extra liquid. So I just wanted to get a solid color here, and my goal was trying to make it as even as possible without a bunch of streaks of different shades or tints of green. We wanted it to just be a solid green as much as we could get it. The second one we're going to do is the graded wash. So this, if you've ever heard the word gradient before, means we're going to get progressively lighter to darker or darker to lighter. So in this situation, we're going to start darker and we're going to work our way lighter. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to use the green so you can see a comparison between the solid wash and the graded wash. But if you'd like, you can pick a different color to use. I'm going to go across once with my green. This is my way I started my solid wash here. Now I'm going to start getting lighter as I go down. I don't want to add any more green to my paintbrush, so I'm just going to add more water to my brush instead, and then I'm going to go over this again, and I'm just continuing to pass further down on my paper, and that is going to pull that color down, and it's going to get progressively lighter as I go down. Again, I'm getting some of this pulling on the side, so I'm going to use my brush to kind of soak some of that up. I got most of the liquid off of my brush. so that I could dab some of that extra water off of my brush. So we've got a gradient here where it's starting off darker, it's getting lighter as I go down, and if I feel like I've lost my gradient at all, then I can always go back over it with more color, add some more color, and then blend either downwards or upwards again to create that graded wash look. So this could be something that you would use for a sky or like a sunset where there are more vibrant colors in certain areas and then they get lighter as they transition either up or down. So that's one place that you could use a graded wash. Glazing is something that we're going to use for later on. So this is one of those ones that I mentioned that we're going to add watercolor paint to that area, but then we're going to do something again with it later once it's dry. So I'm going to switch to yellow now. I would choose a lighter color for this. So again, I have to activate my yellow. So I'm just adding water to it. And over here in the glazing area, I'm just going to add some paint to my paper, and I'm just going to let this sit and dry, nothing else. And there are a few other areas now that I'm going to add or just begin the process of laying some paint down so that we can use it later on. We're going to do the same with the negative painting. I'm going to use some orange here just to switch it up a little bit. We're going to do this down here. So just a little bit of paint, kind of towards the bottom of my box. We're going to let that dry. Same thing with the lift or the feather out box. I'm going to switch and do a blue there. We'll leave that to dry. And then we need to put one on the magic eraser box, which is close to the bottom. I'm going to also do blue again down here. You can choose to use other colors other than what I am doing. So I'm just kind of creating a solid wash on this one as well. And in between my colors, I haven't mentioned this yet, but I'm using the water to clean my brush. And if it gets to the point where I feel like this is getting to be a really dirty brown color, I can always, switch out and get new water. We're gonna go back up now that we have some of these started that need to dry. The wet on wet is the next one that we're going to try. This requires us to first start off with just plain water on our paper. So I cleaned out my brush completely, and even though I have some green in my water, that's okay. When I put it on my paper here, it is completely clear. So I'm just clear water on my paper. I'm going to try two different techniques, one on the left and one on the right. On this side, on the left, and I'm just going to use red since we haven't used that color yet. So I'm activating my red first, getting some red on my brush. I'm going to try just putting drops on top of the left side of this. So I'm just dabbing my paintbrush on the paper, and you'll see that these are spreading out. Because there's water on the bottom of my paper, it's allowing the red that I apply on top to spread out. Now I want to try a graded wash like I did here, but on the right side of this, so you can see a little bit of the difference. And you'll notice that it is going to work a little different than this one. It's going to start bleeding a lot faster than the one on the top row did. Now, this technique where you apply water first, the wet on wet technique, is really great for skies, especially on the right side. Anywhere that you would want to have a really, really soft edge to something, whether that be a sky or something in the background that's really well blended. And you can see over here, these have spread out a lot as well. So that is starting with just water on the bottom first and then applying my color on top. This is going to be a similar technique, the drop on color on wet. So I'm going to try the same type of situation, but instead of having water like I had here, I'm going to apply paint first. So I want to get some color on my brush. I'm going to start with yellow, and I'm going to apply this as a background. I want to have a decent amount of water in my paint with this one because, again, we want it to spread out like it did here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet my brush and clean it out and switch to another color. So I'm going to use red so that I can compare to this one. And I'm going to do the same things I did here, where I drop it on top on the left and then I do a gradient on the right. So I'm touching my brush to the left over here, and you'll see that it's going to start mixing. So because of the water that we have in here, the red and the yellow are going to start mixing. And in the parts where it's really concentrated, like here, we still have that vibrant red color, but then where it's bleeding out, it's mixing with the yellow and it's becoming more of an orange color. So this could also be something cool to use for backgrounds or different things that would require this type of look to it. Maybe it's different spots on an animal or different foliage. But it gives us a little bit more blending on the surface, and it looks a little bit more organic. So you can see here, I started off red, and as I move down, it's blending more and more with the yellow and giving me an orange. On the dry brush, I don't want to have a lot of water on my paper or on my brush. So I'm going to switch to purple, since I have not used purple yet. And I am also going to take most of the color and water out of my brush first and then dip into the purple. So I really don't want to have a lot of water. I want to just show you. So I'm getting more of like a textured look with this. So this could be something you could use for grass or other types of foliage, or maybe fur on an animal. But using hardly any water and just dipping my brush. Now I do have to have water on the palette or else it's not going to allow me to activate the paint. But I really don't want to have like a lot of water in that in the tray of watercolor paint. So just a little bit of water in my paint and hardly any water at all on my brush. And it's allowing me to get this dry brush look that we could use for grass or some kind of fur or anything else that has this textural look to it. Okay, and the last one that we're gonna try for this one is going to be the tape. This one's also close to the bottom. This is where we're gonna need either scissors or an X-Acto knife, and I will show you two different techniques. And if you only have one of those two cutting tools, then you can just do one or the other. If you have both and you want to try both, that's fine as well. So tape allows us to mask off an area on our paper and prevent the watercolor paint from soaking into that part of the paper. So here's what I could do. Option number one is draw a shape. I'm just going to do something that looks kind of like a tree with pencil first, and then I'm going to put tape on top like this and cover over what I've drawn. Then I would use my X-Acto knife to very, very carefully cut only through the tape, not into the paper. So I want to do this softly enough that I'm not ripping through my paper as well. Now this is something that you could use for tree branches. If you painted the trunk area first and then masked it off when it was completely dry, and then painted your leaves on top. Okay, so here's my tape. Now if I don't have the ability to cut out with an X-Acto knife, I could always do the same thing by either drawing on my roll of tape and cutting it out with scissors, or I could just, instead of drawing it on the tape, just cut a shape out of my my tape roll. So I'm cutting this. Oops. And then I would just lay it down and apply it to my paper. Ideally, painter's tape would work best for this. I'm assuming that most of you have masking tape, so that's what we're going to be using in this example. But if you do have something a little bit more heavy duty, like painter's tape, that would be ideal. Okay, I'm actually going to use green for this so we can see if it will give us more of like a branch look, as if I was making a tree with leaves. So I'm painting right over top of the tape, and I need this to completely dry before I remove it from my paper, before I remove the tape from my paper. Okay, so that's all that we're gonna do for this video. We're gonna get to the remaining techniques in future videos, so stay tuned.